since he was 8 years old. And he was told when he was young that he probably wouldn't live real long. Well, he lived well into his 70s, passed away 5 years ago. My first trip to Wautla was in March of 1977. And Don was with us and Richard Schreiber was with us. Camped 2,000 feet deep in the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere. And it was going. It was going to go deeper. And about a week into an underground camp, Don Broussard woke me up early in the morning. Of course, you don't know if it's morning on the surface or not, but underground time, it was early in the morning, and said, I've run out of insulin. I got to go to the surface to get more. And Richard volunteered to go with him. He wasn't going to go by himself. Richard was going to go with him. And we expected some more people to arrive, so Richard was going to come back in with some supplies. About 2 hours after they left camp, I saw lights coming toward camp. That's weird. Something's wrong. And the first thing out of Schreiber's mouth was, gentlemen, there was a woman in there too, but that's what he said. Gentlemen, we have a problem. Well, the problem was that a guy that had left our underground camp 2 days before because he wasn't having a good time, he'd almost gotten washed over a waterfall because he wasn't flipped in. He left by himself the day before, and he'd accidentally pulled a rope up a 318-foot deep pit. And we were marooned. And Richard sat down looking really worried, and then I told him something that worried him all the more. I said, what you guys don't know is that I left a note up there in that house we rented to the people that are arriving and said, don't come in until you've heard from us, and we'll trade off with some people. So let's pull all our food together and ration it and keep going caving. Well, we had schools of thought about whether that was a good idea or not. Maybe we should just sit here and worry. But we didn't. We went caving, and eventually somebody came in upset with us because we hadn't traded off with them. But for 4 days, we went caving when we couldn't get out of the cave, so we had to be extra careful. Marion Smith. Marion Smith is one of my dearest friends. And I met him on my second trip to Ellison's, which was in May of 1969. He'd just gotten out of the Army. And the first trip I was on was in March of '69, and it was the next weekend after Richard and Della had camped in the cave for a week. So you talk about lucky. My first trip to Ellison's, I got to see all that bottom cave first person beside the two of them that had found it and mapped it. And I'm talking about the bottom of Incredible, Angel's Paradise, Hall for the Giants, that's the name of it. And the bloody crawl that leads to Hall for the Giants, there was still blood on the rock from Della, I think. Was that you?
I don't know.
Somebody bled there. That's right. But we came back 6 weeks later. I was in Indiana. I was a student in Indiana University and very interested in going deep. I wanted to go and become a deep caver because I had heard about Golondrinas, and that just fascinated me. I read the books about deepest caves in Europe, which were in France, and had just been translated into English. I wanted to get into that. And I rode back down, camped in a barn at the Hicks farm, met Marion there, and somehow the way it worked out, well, the first thing Richard told us was, we're not going back into Ellison today. It was like, we just drove 6 hours down here for a second trip to Ellison's, and we're not going into Ellison's, and either Della or Richard said, trust us, you'll be happy. Well, we didn't know what it was until we went in the stair-step entrance and figured out, oh, that big dome we saw 6 weeks ago, maybe we're going to the top of it. But they weren't real sure that that was where it was going to end up, because I think the survey was a little off or something like that, whatever. When we got to that crawlway leading to the top of Incredible, somehow it ended up Marion and me dragging that big bag of rope through that belly crawl. And the one thing I remember very well about Marion, he was crawling backwards, pulling it. I was crawling towards him, pushing it. It was a struggle. And finally, he just dropped his face into the water, quit, looked up at me with water all over his face, and he said, "I've always been old." He was 26 years old. I had just turned 20. And he had a full head of hair. Reddish, as I recall. And we were dear friends. Guys, the last time I saw him was at Wind Cave, I believe, at Rapid City, South Dakota, at the convention a couple of years ago, right before I got COVID up there. I was thinking after they were talking about Richard saying, "Don't tell anybody, don't tell anybody," 3 times, right, in that letter? That the first time I heard from Richard, he didn't say, "Don't tell anybody." He asked me, "Who told you?" Now, how did I find out about it? I lived in Indiana. I was in college. I was a caterer up there. It was a well-kept tag secret that fantastic pit had been found in the cinder. How did I find out about it? Well, the way I did was, it turned out that my high school journalism teacher was the mother-in-law of the NSS news editor. And I started going over to their house and helping lay out, remember the light table layout and all that kind of thing for publishing? Back in those days, I'd go over to their house every issue and help lay it out. I met the president of the NSS when I was 16 and so on. And so I went to another state to go to college, but I wanted to do deep caves. So I was working my way toward Surprise Pit and in Fern Cave, Alabama. So for Thanksgiving of '68, I went back and visited the family and the editor of the NSS News who lived in Dayton, Ohio, where I'd grown up and went to high school. And I told him, I'm organizing a trip to go to Surprise Pit, deepest pit in the United States. And he smiled and he said, "Why don't you do the deeper one?" I said, "There's no deeper one." "There's a deeper one." "Where?" "In that general area." I'm not going to tell you where. It's a secret. It's going to come out in the NSS News. But I'll tell you who you write. So I wrote to Richard. And I think that was probably beginning in December 1969. You guys, the first trip was in it was October, wasn't it? Of 68. That was 68. So I wrote to Richard. And he must have been okay with what I said. Well, he did say, "Who told you?" "Who told you?" And there was a tone to it, you know what I mean? Maybe an exclamation point or two. And he said, "Why don't you come and help get us into Ellison's to camp?" And I said, "I'm sort of progressing my way towards something deeper than Surprise Pit. I'd rather just go to Surprise Pit like we've been planning." And Richard said, "We'll meet you there." Do you remember that? Richard and Della met my little group from Indiana at Paint Rock, and we went up to Surprise Pit, and I'll never forget watching her crawl around to Rhodes Ledge in the side of, and I said to my friends, "Am I ever going to be that bold? Ever going to be that confident?" And I did do it eventually, and I circumnavigated that pit at the top and got overly confident and bold. But I'll never forget her doing that. And she amazed me when I was here a year ago, because I said to Della here, and I hadn't seen her in over 50 years. I said to Della, "Do you remember when you started climbing the rope in Fantastic, what I said to you?" "Who's going to remember that?"
I did.
She did. I said, "What? What did I say?" She said,
"How many years of ballet did you take?"
I could see it in her form. All my friends and I just thrashed up a rope, you know? Just no form at all, just get up there. But she pointed her toes and you
That
know.
was fast, too.
I was impressed. I hadn't been caving with that many females before. She showed me, you know, ran it like we are. Back to Marion and this book. This book is, and as Mike said, I'm an author of a caving book. I'm actually the author of 2 caving books. I'm actually the author of 3 caving books, but the 3rd one hadn't been published because it's memoirs and I'm still doing stuff. So I'm adding that one. And I plan to write one eventually about this project, Huautla, in Mexico. And you see there's two other people with shirts on. From their shirts are from, no, that's last year's expedition. This is this year's expedition that Josh has been on. Was on just 6 weeks ago, something like that. It's the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere. And the first time I ever heard of this cave was at the Hicks farm. The first time I went there. And Richard realized, hearing me talk, that I was interested in deep caves and I was going to get a serious dose of it going into Ellison's that day. And he said, well, I've been to one in Mexico. Ron went with the Canadians, and Steve was there too, 68, with those guys. And I met those guys. Those Canadians came back on the 4th of July, 1969, that summer, and we did the first crossover. And we had people go both directions. And when we ran into those Canadians down there in Lower Cave, they told us that there was a copperhead laying waiting for us in the stair step entrance, which did not look like it does now. It was a tight crawlway at the time, or squeezed at the top of the drop. And when we got there, we had a snake enthusiast with us, like Scout. We're Scout, just like Scout. And I waited for him to come up there and go through that crawlway first. He can deal with the snake, and he did. And my first trip to Mexico was with Alan Paget, my brother, Greg Spalding, and Marion Smith. And we did Golondrinas, and we did Wallace, and we did San Antonio, and a whole bunch of caves, practically a bit a day. And that's a whole story in itself. It was an adventure, but with that, I realized Mexico has its challenges to travel around and go in caving, but it's worth it. And I still go. And this cave, Ellison's Cave, is important in terms of the history of exploration of caves in the United States. And this book is a very welcome addition to the body of literature written by American cavers, because you know what? There's not enough of them. And if this room was full of British cavers, there have been 15 authors in the room of caving books, because they like to write caving books. And my book that was held up and my other caving book, To Achieve the River Cave, were both published by Cave Books and edited by the same guy, Red Watson. And a few years later, Red Watson invited me to be associate editor. And I said, Red, you're the guy, you're the wordsmith, you're the guy that likes to beat people up and tell them how many red pens you went through and marking up a manuscript. That's not me, I'll just write them. And he said, that's not what I want you to do. I want you to be like Jackie O was, and she was an associate editor. She got manuscripts in. You know cavers. You go to events. You're active. Try to get books in. And you know what? I couldn't. I tried. Like Josh over there, he had to write one, and Ryan had to write one. And there's others in the room that really owe it to the history of American caving to write a book. You get edited, don't worry, and it ended up being better. You can't be sensitive and try to get something written. In fact, there's a story I tell about, and I'm going to say it. I don't have to tell a word here in a second. But there was an incident that occurred in a Huautla cave one time when we found. Did you go through the scimitar passage? You heard about it. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's 1,800 feet of climbing on the wall above sword blades sticking up. I mean, you don't fall, you be impaled like in a tiger pit. And the first time we did that passage and didn't really get anything, climbed the walls, Bill Stone, who you probably heard of, he fell and one pierced his calf. And I helped pull the fragments of rock out of there and made sure there wasn't a spurter, and just capillary bleeding, so it'd be all right. So wrapped something around it, sent him back to camp by himself. Well, the editor, when he read that, he said, and pardon my French, this just proves you guys are a bunch of assholes. And he was right. He was right. Because the lure of Virgin Cave was more than enough to send that guy back by himself. It's great to be here with y'all. I'm impressed by this book. They've done a super job. It's a wonderful addition to the body of literature. It's going to be exciting at the convention in the next few days for that book to come out. And I'm speaking there Wednesday morning about this project because I'm really proud of it. It's not only the deepest cave in the Western Hemisphere, but we only go there because of Ellison's, because we found out about it from Ellison's and had the experience. Do you all know that in the early days you weren't allowed to use mechanical ascenders on Richard Schreiber's ropes? I guess everybody knows that.
Well, now he bought me a Jumar for my chest.
They were his ropes, and he was certain that that metal on rope would damage the rope. So everybody got really good with cruciate knots.
As you should.
I climbed Golden Dreamus with them.
Well, I just would put my Jumar on about 30 feet up.
All right, thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.